So basically, we are supposed to discuss about individual learning today. The goal is to change the behavior, knowledge, or attitudes through learning. For example, if you have already learned something, so our main target is to change our behavior, knowledge, or attitudes on something through learning. Basically, through learning, what you are getting, so you basically through learning you get some additional information. You get new information about something. So with that information, what will happen? Your behavior is affected, right? So your behavior is changed. So through learning, our ultimate objective is to change our behavior, change our existing knowledge. You know something, right? But with the new knowledge, with the new learning, once a learning taken place, that thing, basically your knowledge will be updated, right? So the same thing applied to the attitudes as well. You have a certain attitude towards something, but you learn on something further. So in that case, your attitude may be changed due to the new learning, new information that you are getting, right? So basically, our target is to change the behavior, knowledge, or attitudes through learning. So why then we are learning? So basically, to change our behavior, to change our knowledge, to change our attitudes on something, right? So therefore, you are learning now. You are learning individual behavior in organizations. So through that learning, what you are doing. So basically, we are supposed to change your behavior, right? You are supposed basically we are you are supposed to change uh, your behavior in a good way, right? So basically, target is to change the behavior, knowledge, or attitudes by learning. Right. So learning is defined as how we can define the learning. So learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior. As discussed in the previous slide, it's basically learning supposed to change the behavior of individuals. So as the name implies, as the definition, as the explanation given based on given for the in the previous slide, basically, so the change learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior. A relatively permanent change in behavior, right? Your behavior is changed relative to the previous behavior, which is a permanent now, right? So your behavior is changed with the new information that you have on something, right? So that is relatively change when it compared to the previous behavior. You behave on particular way, you behave in a on something in a particular way last, let's say last week, right? But you learn something new about the same thing, right? So then you learn something about that, then you behave in this way, which is totally different than the previous last week behavior, right? Since you know about the new thing, a new since you have the new information on that thing, you permanently behave on that thing. You permanently behave. Uh, so you behave in this way, which is relatively changed with the previous behavior, which is now permanent. Right? The way currently you are behaving is now permanent in this way. This is permanent. This is not change, right? So, for example, let's say so there are various examples. Someone told a lie, right? And you didn't know anything about that lie. You believe that the lie, the thing that was told to you is a true thing, and based on that belief, you behave on a particular way last week. But in this week, you realize that the thing told to you, that was told to you, is a lie, right? Now you are not going towards that in this week. Last week you went to that point, not knowing that it is let's say, a lie, believing that it's a true thing, right? You went to a certain point, right? On the last weekend, but you knew that that is a lie. That was a lie, right? And you disappointed by going there, let's say, right? And after going that, you realize that it is a lie, and you disappointed from that point and realize that's useless. Then this week, the same thing told to you. Are you going there? No, you are not going there because you knew that that is a lie, right? So you got a new information on something. Based on that, you are not going there, right? So compare the two behaviors, the previous last week behavior and this week behavior. Because of the new information that you obtain, you are not going there, right? And you are not going there forever, for example, right? So this means that the last week behavior, when you compare the behavior last week you demonstrated with the current behavior, the last week the current behavior is relatively changed when it compares to the last week behavior. The current behavior is slightly, the current behavior is a change in behavior when you compare the same behavior demonstrated in the last week, right? But you are thinking that you are not going, you are not, let's say, you are not going to that place that I was talking about permanently, right? Which means that the change is permanent. So something, when you are getting something new, when you are getting an information which is new to you, and based on that new information, your behavior is different. Your behavior will be changed, right? That behavior is relatively permanent change, right? Basically, the behavioral change is there, which is permanently, which is the behavioral change is permanent when your behavior is compared, current behavior is compared with the previous behavior, right? So that's how you can define the learning. When the learning taken place, obviously your behavior is changed, which is relatively permanent change, right? So how you can define the learning? So basically, the relatively permanent change in behavior. So that's how you can define the learning. A relatively permanent change in particular behavior, right? Uh, right. So learning curves. For example, since learning is basically getting new information. With that new information, your behavior is changed, right? Which is relatively permanent change. So based on the information that you are getting, the rate of information that you are getting, or in other words, the rate of learning, right? That individual is involved in learning basically. So that we can draw different diagrams or curve, right? For example, so when represent the x-axis, so x-axis is denoted for the time taken. Y-axis is learning proficiency. Y-axis denoted for learning proficiency, the rate of progression that a particular individual rate of progression the individual particularly taken, right? So basically, for example, if you take, let's say, 1 week's time, 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, or maybe at the first month, second month, third month, fourth month, fifth month, likewise at the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, right? So for example, right? So you can have different time durations: first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, sixth year, right? So now in the first year, you have this much of knowledge. And in the second year, let's say you have your learning progress. Let's say you got how you measure your learning progression. So by giving an examination, for example, right? So let's say so we started at 8:30. Now let's say by time is now is 2 o'clock. During the last 30 minutes, I can assess your basically I can assess your learning rate or learning progression, right? By giving an examination, for example, from things that I have taught you, that I taught you, right? So basically, we can basically learning progress of an individual can be measured by means of an examination, by means of a test, right? By means of a question and answer session, and I can allocate marks. So these are the marks that you have obtained, right? In this axis, you can simply mark the marks that you have obtained in this axis. For example, at the first hour or at the first year end examination, you scored 30 marks, right? And at the second year, you got nearly 60 marks, double. Your learning profession has been doubled. And in the third year, right, maybe 80 marks. And the fourth year, maybe 100. This is how you have progressed during the last 4 years, right? Sometimes someone has this kind of a shape of a curve, right? But up to let's see when you compare this when you examine this curve, like in the first year, he has progressed at this much, and in the second year he has progressed at this much, right? And third year, very slight improvement, small improvement when compared to the last year, right? So let's say 60, now 62 in the second year, the third year, right? And in the fourth year, no improvements, same marks obtained. And in the fifth year, he has lose some marks. Now he is in the 58 position. 58, has earned 58 marks, which means that a slight decline in learning from professions. Right? So likewise, different curves are there. So different types of curve can be drawn for different types of individual, because not we are talking about, since the subject is individual behavior in organization. So our behavior, we are supposed to learn the learning behavior of an individual, right? So when you take the 10 people, 10 student in a particular class, take our class for example, right? So the things I am teaching may not be 100% absorbed by each and every student equally, right? Things I am teaching may not be 100% absorbed by the each and every student equally. So one can have the capacity of absorbing what I'm teaching only 30%. So that is reflected by the marks earned. Another can have 60% of absorption rate, learning absorption rate, or learning rate, for example, in others. And the another one has 100% learning rate, right? So that depends on the mental capacities. So we were talking about diversity uh, last week, last time. So the learning differences again coming under the diversity, which is basically specifically talking about the diversity which is coming under the deep level diversity, not the we basically at the last week basically we discussed about the surface level diversity, right? Appearance, basically diversity in appearance, surface level diversity. But this is when it comes to this one, learning. So this comes under the deep level diversity. We can't see. the way how people learn, the rate of which uh, the individuals basically learn something, right? So that differs from person to person. So therefore, rate of trainee progression may can differ from person to person. Right? Therefore, so directly we can observe the rate of trainee progression by means of a learning curve, right? So we can draw, if you take, for example, we have 10 students in our class right now. I can ask 5 questions, right? So then you are asked to respond to those 5 questions. Then after your responses, then I evaluate your mark and basically I'm giving some marks to you, right? One can score 100 marks, right? Another one can score 60 marks, and marks vary by person to person, right? Obviously, there may be 5 people scored less than 50, another 2 people scored more than 80, another remaining two maybe scored less than 70, more than 70. Right? So that's how individuals can earn marks that reflects the learning capacity, the rate of training or the rate of learner progression on something, right? So basically, we can draw learning curves to reflect the rate of learner progression, right? So basically, in other words, we can demonstrate, we can display the individual differences of learning processes by means of uh, the learning curve, right? So basically, if suppose we have 10 students in our class, right? So to denote those 10 students, the rate of learning progression, we can draw simply 10 learning curves, right? For example, we can draw a one learning curve for one individual. So this is something like that. That is something like this, right? So another student, for example, another one having this kind of a curve, right? So which means that he's having a higher rate of learning, very high rate of learning within short time period, right? So this is the time taken and rate of learning progression is this much large. And when you go take this point, right? So same time, but when this time this much, and the second time this much, and third time, let's say this much, slight higher than the previous two. The rate of progression is somewhat higher than the previous two levels, right? So when you have this kind of uh, curve, right? So when you have this kind of a curve, so this shows us very rapid, quick learner. So this type of curve denotes for a quick learner, right? Or rapid learner. And this time maybe during the beginning period, so slight increase in the learning progression, but after a certain time point, then he has not grown further, right? This time. And you can have this type of curve, right? So various types, you can have this type of curve for a particular individual. You can have this type of a curve, right? You can have, let's say, this type of a curve. You can have this type of curve, even, right? So you, at the very first time, first year, you demonstrated this much of level of learning proficiency. But over the time, your learning progression has significantly decreased. So this is extraordinary situation, unexpected situation, because after, let's say, after following a particular course, let's say 4 year course, his knowledge has been decreased rather than improving. Normal situation is normally after following a particular course day by day, we are supposed to get something new. Today you are getting something new, right? So you are always after completing a certificate day by day when you are completing a particular course of a study. Obviously, you are learning something new day by day. So you must have, demonstrated learning progression. But the problem in this case here is uh, your learning progression has been decreased. There is maybe there may be other factors that have been involved to decrease the learning rate. So we need to immediately find out the reasons why this particular learner has declined the learning progression, right? So learning by drawing learning curves, we can simply identify the ways of uh, learners learning, or the ways by which or the rates by which the individuals learning, right? So simply uh, I can ask a question from you. Why we draw learning curves? And what is the significance of having learning curves in a teaching activity? How can you respond to this question? Sometimes the same question may be appearing in the examination as well, right? How individuals, in order to demonstrate the way how individuals uh, uh, learning uh, taken place, or the rate at which the learning taken place. So what mechanisms that can be used to demonstrate this? The question is like that. Simply, you can answer it like this by simply drawing learning curves. Learning curves basically displays the way or the rate at which the individuals progress in their learning. Right? For each and every individual, we can draw different learning curves. Not the different, we can draw learning curves since individuals are differed by means of their learning capacities. Obviously, uh, different people demonstrate different patterns of learning curves. So that's the basic concept, right? So therefore, why? Then the question can be asked like this: why we draw learning curves? The second question: why we draw learning curves? The answer is why we draw. The answer is for why we draw learning curves. The why is the answer. Sorry, why is the question? What will be the answer? Why you are going to draw? Why you are drawing learning curves? Simply, answer is we can understand the patterns of learning, right, of the learner. Or in other words, we can identify the rate of learner's progression during a certain time period, the way how he or she has progressed over the time, right? So that is the answer. So there are basically two questions can be asked. Why we draw learning curves? What do you mean by learning curves? And why we draw learning curves? Right? So how we can demonstrate a learning curve? How we can draw a learning curve? What demonstrates the learning curve? Right? So basically, those are the types of questions that can be asked. Right. So that's all about the learning curve. Right. So now learning theories. Right. So there are theories which have been proposed by the scholars uh, to the ways individuals, or by means the individual learns. What are the principles behind the learning, and how the learning is taken place uh, by the individuals, right? So theory basically gives some guidelines. Theory offers principles, right? So basically, when it comes to the learning theories offers the ways, or the basically the methods or the principles of learning, right? So there are basically several theories that must be discussed in this class. One is sensory stimulation theory. Sensory stimulation theory. What is that? Right? So we have basically different senses. We have basically different senses. Five senses in fact, right? Nose, ears, eyes, mouth, touch, right? So all these five senses are there. So those five senses uh, carry signals to the brain on something, right? Once, for example, we have a smell, a good smell, odor, in other words. So the type of the odor or the smell brings uh, basically carry signals about the type of the odor to the brain, obviously by means of nose, right? So we are hearing, let's say, a song, right? So we enjoy, we entertain that songs through the brain sensors, basically. So that is normally channeled to the brain by the ears, and we are talking by our mouths, right? So the processes coming from the brain, right? So basically, five senses are there. All these five senses bring channels, sorry, carry information, carry some signals to the brain. Now, this learning theory is the sensory stimulation theory. What it says, sensory stimulation theory highlights or stipulates that all the senses need to be activated in a learning activity. All the senses need to be activated in a learning activity to take place the learning process effectively, right? In order to have a fruitful learning process, you must activate your all the five senses, at least more than one sense, right? So let's say you are preparing for an examination. How you can read, how you can study your lessons that have been done during the semester. How you study the lesson for the how you prepare for the examination by simply reading, just going through loudly and read all the sentences in the book that was done by your teacher, right? So I have seen some people read, write, and again read and again write and make short notes. And so we have basically auditory learners. We have basically visual learners. We have basically kinesthetic learners. We how individuals learn. Depending on the ways how individuals learn, basically we have different categorization of learners. Visual learners, those who highly prefer only visual things when preparing or learning in a learning activity. Visual things. Some people prefer mostly to the visual things. When you are shown uh, video presentation, when you are shown a slide, PowerPoint slides, right? Some people may be highly attracted towards those things. Some people may prefer only the listening kind of things, right? So they don't prefer to see the slide, they don't prefer to see the videos, only just enough for hearing for them, right? So which means that their ears are really active because all the things that you are learning is channeled through your ears to the brain. And some people both needed to be activated, let's say ears and eyes, right? So ears for hearing and eyes for uh, sight, basically vision, right? So basically, they see the things by their eyes, they hear the things, the same thing by the ears. Let's say, for example, you are listening to my lecture now by looking at the slides, right? So you are not just merely hearing, At the same time, simultaneously you are hearing, simultaneously you are looking at the slides, right? So, and basically you are looking at the things that I'm drawing on the slideshow, right? So the two things, the same thing channeled to your brain by means of two channels, ears and eyes. And let's say I'm teaching now, you are writing what I'm talking about now, what I'm teaching now, you are writing by your own words. Each single word I'm talking about, uh, you are writing. My entire explanation is written in a book, on a book. And at the same time, you are listening. When you are writing, what happens? Normally, you are writing on your paper what I'm talking about. So then your hand is working and you are looking at it. Your eyes are working. And your again, when you are writing something by hearing, obviously you need to murmur it, right? By innately you are talking about the thing that you are writing, right? So basically, at least three things, and you are at the same time you are hearing four things activated, four channels activated, right? So when you are writing the things that you are hearing in a lecture, so obviously your hand is working, the touch is working, touch sense is working, your hand is working. To work your hand, you basically need to activate your brain further. You need to hear very carefully what I'm talking about. So your eyes, ears are working really, right? So now your hand is working, your ears are working. Now you need to look at. By closing your eyes, you can't write on a paper, but you are hearing, right? So clearly your eyes must be really working to write that you are thinking or listening to a particular lecture. Things that you are listening, in order to write the things that you are listening, obviously your eyes need to be really activated, right? So there are three things: ears working, eyes working, and your touch hands working, right? So three things basically working. Now mouth. In order to write the thing, you need to imagine, you need to think about the thing that you are going to write in your mind, and that must be murmured, right? That must be innately, silently. You need to talk about the thing that you are writing. You need to talk about, right? You are talking about the things that you are writing in silently, innately. So then your mouth is working, right? At least the same thing channel to your brain. What you are so for example, you are learning on something. The thing that you are learning is channeled to your brain by means of four channels, four senses, right? So what is the best way to learn? Because the fourth same thing, when the same thing channeled to the brain by four means, here simply means that your brain is really activated. Brain cells are really working, right? So then your memory capacity on the thing, your understanding capacity on the thing that you are learning is very high, effective. Effective learning taken place. So therefore, in order to have an effective learning, so what that must be done, what that you need to do. So you need to activate at least more than one or two senses of you, right? So when you are able to activate more than at least five senses, right? So your brain is really activated in a learning activity. You can really concentrate on the things that you are learning, right? So in that, basically, your memory capacity, your understanding capacity on the things that you are learning is very high, right? So this is what sensory stimulation theory is, right? So then what you can do, so at least you need to write something about the things that you are learning. right? So while, let's say, for example, how you can practice this? Simply, let's say, from start to the end, without stopping, take a piece of paper and pen. When you are listening to the lecture, when you are participating in the lecture, rather than just merely looking at the uh, lecturer. So obviously, you can simply hear the lecturer, the things that he is talking about, and at least you can look at the slides. And while looking at and while listening to the lecture, obviously, you are supposed to write the same thing. The lecturer, the talking, the things that the lecturer is talking about can be written in on your own paper by your own words. So that's the way how this can be practiced. So when doing that, obviously you can activate four senses simultaneously, right? Try this at your class. Then at the examination, you can realize you can earn more marks because your memory capacity and you can test, right? You can experience that how much your memory capacity, how much the things that you have understood when you practice this, right? So because as a person, I learned this from my grade six, at my grade six, and from that point afterwards, I practice this in each and every examination that I was facing in my life, in the throughout the past, right? I practice this. So and this is my real success. This is my real factor for my successful career, lecturing career. So that was really helpful to come to this point in my career, right? So practice this, then get try to experience it. So then you will finally realize that the things that you learn really have been understood and really have in your memory when you at least when you activate at least two or three senses in a learning activity. So therefore this particular learning theory postulates that all the senses must be activated in a learning activity. If you can activate all the senses in a learning activity, your learning capacity and your learning effectiveness is very high, right? Right, so effective, what it says about, as I told you, right, effective learning occurs when the senses are stimulated. This was found by Laird by in 1985. So effect especially the visual senses learning can be enhanced. The sense of touch, taste, smell should also be included in the learning process. Seeing and hearing senses are mostly used in one's learning. So basically, all the five senses, if possible, right? If it is not possible, for example, in some cases, the taste cannot be taken place in a certain learning activity, right? At least you can activate three or maximum two, right? So hearing and only ears and eyes you can really activate, right? So rather than just merely hearing, rather than just merely looking at, seeing, ears by ears, right? By eyes, sorry, seeing by eyes. So therefore, basically, you need to activate maximum five, minimum two senses. The strongest argument for the sensory stimulation. The stimulation in the senses is achieved through a greater variety of. So therefore, how we can give the stimulation to the learner's brain or learner's all the sensory channels. So they basically, the lecturer in the designing stage of a particular lecture, he can incorporate all the teaching materials that can engage, that can activate all the five senses. Let's say, for example, I'm loudly talking about the things, some things which are supposed to teach, right? For example, as I'm doing right now, each and every concept clearly can be told, and I can prepare a PowerPoint presentation, including graphics, including video presentations, including some videos to elaborate the things that I'm talking about more. So I can design by incorporating various colors, by incorporating various, word patterns. A simple language can be used, right? So all these are seeing materials, and also I can clearly tell that I'm going to talk about. I'm clearly explaining the things that I'm supposed to teach. So audibility can be maintained clearly. So therefore, that really activates your ears, right? So now eyes activated, ears activated. Then I can give a classroom experiment, for example, right? For example, last time I asked you to summarize all the things that I told to you in the previous one before the last lecture on a paper, right? So now let's say I'm giving you an exercise, the things I told just before 5 minutes, right? Uh, then I can ask you to write down the things that you learned just before the 5 minutes, 5 minutes before. Then, so initially you are memorizing the things, or maybe sometimes you can be asked to write the things that I'm talking about at the same time. And I can give you an activity, for example. So activity based learning, for example. While teaching, I can give you some activities to really activate your touch sense, right? So that therefore teaching methodology can be designed in a way that your all the five senses can be activated. So in that case, if the teacher is designing the lectures for the teaching methodology in that way, in a way that all the five senses of the learners can be activated. So in that case, learning taken place very nice. The learning taken place effectively. So the learners have the highest possibility to earn more marks, because the way how I am teaching, the way how the learning theory is basically sensory stimulation theory highlights. If you can follow the instructions or principles highlighted by the sensory stimulation theory in a learning activity, obviously your learners will have the higher capacities of learning. So that's basically the main idea of the sensory stimulation. In summary, so in a learning activity, all the five senses need to be activated. If you are a teacher, your task is to design your lecture, design your teaching activity in a way that all the five senses of the learners can be activated. If you are a student, for example, so you must try to activate your all the five senses in the learning activity. How can that be done? Simply by writing the things that the teacher is talking about on a piece of paper by your own language. So that's the easiest way to practice the sensory stimulation here. Or maybe at your classroom, the things that the particular teacher is talking about or teaching can be practiced at home just after arrival of your arriving at home, right? So maybe sometimes a school particular theory is taught when it comes to physics or chemistry, particular theory is taught at the class, and you can experiment at the same thing at your home after arriving to your home, right? So maybe let's say if it is a social science related thing, like what we are doing now, this particular theory can be practiced at the class, right? So basically, the idea is activities by learning by experience. So when you learn by experience, obviously, at least you can activate more than one or more than two senses, right? So this is sensory stimulation. Color volumes, different colors can be used, different volume levels can be used, strong statements can be used, facts presented visually, you can present the facts visually, and use of variety of techniques and medias to demonstrate the particular thing. Let's say, for example, let's say I'm talking about what I want to do is now is to teach a learning theories, sensory stimulation theory. For example, I can give you a video on that, right? The same thing, same content can be given on a PowerPoint presentation by means of a PowerPoint presentation. And the same thing I can explain by my mouth. And by using the blackboard, I can draw the same thing on the board, right? So one particular thing is channeled your brain by different means, by using different sound levels, by using different color combinations, by using different animations, right? By using different, let's say, audible levels, right? Uh, so various techniques are there in order to activate your brain, right? If a person prefers to learn through visual aids, apart from that, sometimes we have different because we are talking about individual differences. We are talking about deep level diversity by means of learning, right? So we try to understand that individuals differs by means of deep level things as well. So one particular example is learning. So learning can take place differently in individuals, which means that different people learn at different levels of learning capacities, right? So therefore, in that sense, some people may prefer only for learning or prefer only for visual aids. So those people are known as visual learners. Some people I have seen that some people, by using their headphones, simply tape record the lecture, and without any seeing materials, simply just by using their phone they record the lecture, and by using when just after going home, they have a nap on the bed, and by using the earphone, simply they are listening to the lecture. So in that case, uh, their ears are really actively working. So those type of learners are known as auditory learners because their eyes are really working. So we have visual learners, we have auditory learners. And apart from all these, besides all these, instead of all these things, two types, uh, we have another type which is called kinesthetic learners. Kinesthetic learners are learners who prefer to learn the things by doing simply. Their ears are no longer working, their eyes are no longer working, but they prefer to the things that they heard about, that they have seen by doing, right? So by doing that they heard about it, that they heard or that they seen, something that was seen, or something that have been heard, uh, need to be experienced at home maybe sometimes at the classroom. So those type of people are known as kinesthetic learner, right? So that is there. Different types of people are there, but averagely, this theory highlights that all the senses, at least maximum five senses, minimum at least two senses. So two senses need to be activated in order to have a fruitful learning activity, effective learning activity. So that's the main idea of learning sensory stimulation theory. Right. So we have, apart from that, we have another theory. So that is called as uh, classical conditioning theory. Right. So we have different videos on YouTube about the classical conditioning theory. You can simply watch them. And in this link, particularly, so this theory particularly highlights in detail uh, about this theory. So the video in this link, right? So you can simply copy it and play it on the Google, play it on the YouTube. So let's see what it is and what it says about.
Pavlov's aim was to discover what caused saliva to flow. He rerouted the salivary ducts to the outside of his dog's cheek so that he could collect and measure the spittle. Perhaps, he thought, the production of saliva might be the result of a fixed nervous reflex, like a knee jerk.
5 минут 42,5 секунды.
After taking many measurements of spittle, he confirmed that the dogs drooled automatically when their tongues touched food. He called the response the salivation reflex.
4,5. Хорошая собачка. Я предлагаю поменять собаку.
But his work started to run into trouble. As his dogs became familiar with the experimental routine, they started to fill their cheek tubes before Pavlov had a chance to stimulate their tongues. The dogs were learning to anticipate food. Pavlov tried a new technique. He erected screens so that the dogs couldn't see what was going on. Before passing meat through the hatch, he introduced a stimulus that was totally unrelated to feeding. A ticking metronome. At first, the dog dripped saliva into its cheek tube only when the food appeared. But after a number of trials, the dog began to connect the ticking with the arrival of meat. Soon, the sound alone made the dog drool. Eventually, the dog salivated as much to the ticking itself as it did originally to the presentation of food.
Полная. Идите сюда. Что я говорил?
He called this new response the conditioned reflex.
Собака.
Whatever the stimulus, his dogs could soon be conditioned to produce saliva. Pavlov believed that he had discovered how animals learned, even in the wild.
Sunset Black Shine.
Right? So I believe you got the point. Now, so there are so many other sources. So this is what was shown in the video. Basically, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Right? So basically, this particular theory highlights that how animals learn. Since human beings are living being, all the living being, this theory relates to all the living beings, how they learn. So by taking a dog, so this theory basically tested and found that all the humans, all the animals, all the living beings learn, right? So basically, in order to demonstrate this theory, how basically what are the three stages revealed? What are the three stages suggested? In the first stage, unconditioned stimulus was given, right? Unconditioned stimulus is the food. So once the foods are offered to the dog, uh, before, let's say, before offering, just the food is shown to the food. The food is shown to the dog. So then, once the dog sees the food, normally what happens is the dog became to salivate, right? Dog's mouths became to salivate. Then, so the next time, before offering the food, a bell rang, right? A bell rang. Then, then no effect found. So once the particular bell rang, rather than just offering the food, no effect found. No effect in the sense that no salivation found, right? Because there is no connection with the ringing bell has no connection with the food. He realized that the ringing bell is not the food, right? But in the next stage, what happens was what the Paolo, the one who introduced this theory, Ivan Paolo, uh, uh, did was uh, uh, along with the unconditional stimulus, that is, while offering the food, he rang the bell, right? So while offering the food, uh, he rang the bell. So then dog learned that there is a connection. For example, just before a few minutes, he rang the bell, and after that, the food is offered. Then, so after doing repeated several times, the dog learned that ringing bell is associated with offering food to him. So then it became salivation, right? So once a bell rings, obviously uh, the dog's mouth started salivation, right? So uh, then the next stage, obviously without offering food, the bell was rang. So then the dog realized that ringing bell is associated with offering food next time. So soon, once the bell rang, hearing the sound of a bell, the dog learned that the food comes, right? So because at this point he learned that the food is associated with the bell ringing, right? So once in the third stage, once the bell is rang, dog have learned that dog has learned that the next step is next immediate outcome after ringing a bell is his food, right? So then after hearing the ringing of a bell, so dog learned that the immediate outcome is having the food, right? So then after hearing just at the hearing of a ring of a bell, so then dog's mouth became salivation, started salivation. So this is basically how the individuals learn, right? So ඒකනේ අපි අර කියන්නේ ගිනි පෙල්ලෙන් බැට කාපු මිනිහා කණාමැදිරි එළියටත් බයයි කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ ගිනි පෙල්ලෙන් බඩ කෑවනම් කණාමැදිරි එළලයක් දකින්නකොට වුණත් එයා බය වෙනවා. ඇයි ඒ බය වෙන්නේ? Because he has learned that, right? අර ගිනි පෙල්ලයි එළියයි දෙක අතර සමානතාවයක් තියෙනවා. කණාමැදිරි එළියටත් බයයි. So he has learned that. So that is how individuals learn, right? ඒකට මේක බල්ලෙක් ඉගෙන ගන්න ප්‍රයෝජනයට අරගෙන තමයි මේක ඉදිරිපත් කරේ. බල්ලෙක් ඉගෙන බල්ලෙක් කොහොමද ඉගෙන ගන්නේ මේ එක පරීක්ෂා කරේ මෙන්න මේ විදියට ඒ වගේම මිනිස්සුන්ට අපේ ලෝකෙ මේක කරනවා කියලා බලන්න. Right? So this is basically Paulo's classical conditioning theory. Right? So initially, three stages was these things: unconditioned stimulus, natural stimulus, and conditioned stimulus. Right? Unconditioned, when unconditioned stimulus introduced, unconditioned response demonstrate. When a conditioned stimulus respond introduced, then conditioned response generated. Right? So this is the main idea of the classical conditioning theory. How you can explain this is that basically, as the video showed you, basically, so this is how we can, basically the idea can be demonstrated, right? So classical conditioning is a type of learning that happens unconsciously. When you learn through classical conditioning, an automatic conditioned response is paired with the specific stimulus. This creates a behavior. Behavior is the starting to become salivation or starting to salivate. To test this theory, that the dogs were salivating because they were associating the people with being fed. He began ringing a bell and then presenting the food, so they had associated the sound with food. These dogs learn to associate the bell ringing with food, causing their mouths to salivate whenever the bell rang, not just when they encountered the food. Conditioning is beneficial in an evolutionary sense because it helped us create expectations to prepare for future events. For example, getting ill from a certain food helps us associate that food with sickness. In turn, that helps prevent us from getting sick in the future. So the last sentence is the very much important for this theory, particularly practically elaborated by this example. For example, you are getting a certain food. So after having that food, you get sick. So then you learn that having this kind of a food will associate to certain type of sickness. So then in the next time what you do, you don't get that. So because you have learned that. So the having this particular food, let's say you have a soft drink, you have a soft drink, particular brand, right? After having it, so you got allergy. You, let's say you had a yogurt cup, then you went to the shop and you had a yogurt, and you after a certain time period, after a few minutes, then you realize that you got allergy, right? You got some bubbles on your skin, and so you went to the hospital and got medicine. The next time you go to the same shop and you see the yogurt, the same brand, and realize that you get sick, you get allergies by having this, and you prevent having buying that yogurt, right? So that's the new behavior. The previous behavior is that, and the new behavior is this, right? Not buying that. Previous behavior is buying that yogurt. And buying that yogurt was associated with the sickness. You realize that, you learn that. So then, the doing the same behavior in the current point of time, so you learn that may have a same outcome, may have a same association of having sickness, right? So therefore, so since that has been learned, obviously you preventing buying that, right? You prevent from buying that. So therefore, so that's learning. So learning simply, so this particular example reflects the definition, right? So relatively permanent change in certain behavior. You bought that yogurt last week and had some allergies, right? And now you are not buying this because there is an association of having a yogurt and having allergies, right? So therefore, so then you simply buying from prevent from buying the yogurt. So earlier last week behavior is that, current behavior is not buying that, right? So which is totally permanent. You are no longer in the future. You will never buy, let's say, those that brand yogurt brand, because you learn that so you have, once it is once that is bought, once that is having, uh, obviously you get sick, right? So you never buy that. So now the new behavior is permanently changed from the current behavior, relatively permanent change from the current, from the previous behavior. So that's the definition. That's how you learn, right? So that's what the same thing done by the dog, right? So this is basically that is basically highlighted by uh, classical conditioning theory. And we have another thing, and reinforcement theory, right? Reinforcement theory basically. Uh, so another theory of learning. So what is that highlighted? So behavior is a function of its consequences, right? So behavior is a function of its consequences. So you behave on something, you behave in a certain way on something if you are benefited. Because let's say, for example, you have come to this, you have registered in this particular course because of, mainly because of the certificate that we are offering. Let's say we are not offering any certificate or diploma or any formal certificate, right? Are you going to register with this? No, no one will register because your ultimate target is to have a diploma certificate. Right? So that's the outcome. That's the consequence of this particular entire learning process done by us in our university. After 1 year's period, after regularly participating all the activities in the learning process we are doing, right? You will at the end you will get a certificate, diploma certificate. So that's your main ultimate objective, right? Yeah, that's your main ultimate outcome, consequence of this particular diploma certificate, right? Certificate is the outcome. So then your behavior, you regularly come to this class, you learn the things that you are being taught, and because you have an examination, you have assignment, you have to score the marks, right? You have to get the marks for each and every subject. There are requirements. Those requirements need to be fulfilled in order to get this diploma. Because if you are unable to fulfill those requirements, you will no longer be awarded uh, a certificate by the university. And in order to fulfill all these requirements, you are coming regularly to the class and you are trying to fulfill all these requirements. So, trying to fulfill all these requirements is a behavior. Depending on that behavior is dependent on the consequence. Consequence is the diploma certificate, right? So that's the idea. So in order to get a particular thing learned, so we need to offer, because for the sake of the diploma certificate, you learn all these things. You learn all these things. So ultimately, you are being developed. Your thinking pattern is changed, right? So because of the diploma certificate, because we give a reward is the diploma certificate. So you simply register uh, with this course in order to get that certificate. But not only you are getting that certificate, but also you are getting the knowledge, right? But let's say we are trying to give the knowledge without giving a certificate. Will you register for that? So then our target is to give the knowledge to you. But we are not offering a certificate. We are not offering a certificate, diploma certificate. Will you register with this? No, you will not register because you register with the outcome in order to, with the intention of getting that outcome. Outcome is the diploma certificate. That's the main target of you, right? So you target that, and by means of that, then you learning new things, learning HR. So that's everything. That's how everything happens. In order to get a particular thing learned, so you need to associate a reward or an outcome, positive outcome uh, that need to be associated with the learning process. Then people will learn. ඒකනේ අර අපි පුංචි කාලේ කියන්නේ හිෂත්තෙන් පාස් වුණොත් බයිසිකලයක් කරන්න දෙනවා. හිෂත්තෙන් පාස් වුණොත් බයිසිකලයක් කරන්න දෙනවා. Because you value most that bicycle rather than just learning. So obviously, when you value that bicycle, automatically, indirectly, you will learn something. Right? So that's how learning takes place. In order to learn something to take place effectively, that must be associated with a positive outcome. So that's the main idea of this theory. So reinforcement theory highlights that. So in order to take the main idea of it is in order to take place a certain in order to learn or in order to take place a learning, right? The learning process, in order to take place a certain learning process on something, so that effectively that must be associated with a good outcome, positive outcome, or in other words, a reward. That learning process must be associated with the good outcome. So the good outcome is the degree certificate or diploma certificate, right? So then obviously by having with the intention of having that certificate, you learn. You regularly participate to the classroom. You do the examination. You fulfill all the requirements, right? So then ultimately we give the certificate. So the reward, not only the rewards, but also with this entire process, not only the reward, but also the learning taken place effectively. Then we can develop a society, right? So the attitudes, new knowledge, all the things can be improved. But so see how many sources are available currently, right? In the YouTube. So simply, but YouTube do not offer any certificate, any diploma or something related to that is not offered, right? But see how many sources are there to learn. But you are not registering to any, subscribing to anything. You would merely subscribing to the gossip channels, but not to subscribe into the learning content because you are not interested with that. But if a particular, let's say, world-renowned YouTube channel so that can offer high knowledge and highly recognized like university, then you obviously subscribe to that channel and have some degrees from them if that is recognized, right? Because you value the degree certificate, not the learning content, for example. Right? So that's how a particular learning can be taken place effectively when a entire learning process can be is associated with a good outcome. Right? So we have another version of this theory when, for example, you are targeted to not to repeat the wrong behavior. So what we can do? We can introduce a negative consequence. Let's say, for example, the same example, we don't offer the diploma certificate unless you fulfill all the requirements. Let's say somebody has failed to face a particular examination. Let's say you were unable to sit for the IBO subject. So in that case, will you be able to get the diploma? No, you are not. You will not be given that diploma because you have not fulfilled. So that is a punishment. So punishment is a negative consequence because negative consequence at the same time have been introduced not to repeat the bad behaviors. We have now introduced that attendance, 50% attendance. Why? So in order to get the maximum, in order to get the diploma certificate, you need to maintain at least 50% of attendance for each and every subject. Let's say you have scored 40% of attendance for a certain subject. So in that case, you are not allowed to sit for the examination. So now what happens now? Your intention is to get the diploma certificate. With the intention of getting that diploma certificate, you regularly come to the class. You prevent the negative behaviors. You try to maintain always the positive behaviors, right? In order to get that certificate. So then how we can use this, the reinforcement theory. Reinforcement, we have positive reinforcement, at the same time we have negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcements are introduced to repeat the correct behavior, and we at the same time we can introduce the negative reinforcements to not to repeat the bad behaviors. So our in this case, bad behavior is not coming to the lectures, good behavior is coming to the lectures. And those who come to the lectures will be awarded by the diploma, and those who are not coming to the lectures will not be awarded. Your intention is to get the reward, get the certificate. Now, in order to move, in order to in order to carry you towards the correct behavior, obviously we have introduced negative consequences, negative punishments. Punishment are those, right? So those who are not maintaining the proper attendance 50% level, they are not allowed to sit the examination. So in that case, they are not given. Uh, the positive reinforcement to repeat the correct behavior and negative reinforcement to not to repeat the bad behaviors. ඒකනේ අපි කියන්නේ ශිෂ්‍යත්වයේ පාස් වුණොත් විතරක් බයිසිකලයක් අරන් දෙනවා. ෆේල් වුණොත් මොකද කරන්නේ? ෆේල් වුණොත් බයිසිකලය අරන් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙනම් බයිසිකලෙත් තියෙන ආසාවට රිවෝඩ් එක බයිසිකලෙත් තියෙන ආසාවට පාස් වෙනවා. නේ? බයිසිකලයක් ඕනේ නැහැ කියලා කිව්වොත් එයා ෆේල් වෙනවා. හරි. එහෙනම් එයාගේ අපි රිවෝඩ් එකක් දෙනවා. රිවෝඩ් එකට කැමැත්ත නිසා තමයි එයා ඉගෙන ගන්නේ. එහෙනම් අපිට ඉගෙන ගැනීම ප්‍රොමෝට් කරවන්න ඕන නම් අපි රිවෝඩ් එකක් දෙනවා. හරිනේ? ඒතකොට රිවෝඩ් එකක් නොදී හිටියොත් ඉගෙන ගන්න එක ඒ කියන්නේ රිවෝඩ් එක අත්‍යවශ්‍යම වෙන අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ඉගෙන ගන්න. එහෙනම් අපිට correct behavior එක ප්‍රොමෝට් කරන්න ඕන නම් අපි positive reinforcement එකක් introduce කරනවා. correct behavior එක wrong behavior එක negative කරන්න ඕන. wrong behavior එක නරක behavior එකක් demotivate කරන්න නම් අපි negative consequence එකක් introduce කරනවා. එතකොට නරක behavior එක කරන්න යන එක නවතිනවා. Right. So this is positive reinforcement. So there are various positive reinforcement. නේ දැන් හොඳම උදාහරණය තමයි I want you to talk more at the classroom. But the current scenario is you are no longer talking with me, right? I'm asking questions, and very few, only one or two students are talking with me in the class. But my task, my effort is to talk everyone to talk. Now I'm saying that I'm asking questions. The one who is going to the one who is answering the question will be rewarded by 1,000 rupees for each and every answer they are giving. Now what we'll see? What will happen? Everyone will talk. So after participating a lecture, so you will get nearly 20,000 rupees each one of you. Let's say. So then you regularly come to the lecture and try to answer the questions, right? So that's how. And those who are not talking will not be given 1,000 rupees. So that's the punishment, negative consequence. So that negative consequence has been introduced not to do that behavior repeatedly, right? Not to do that behavior repeatedly. And in other words, to avoid the negative behavior, because I'm considering not answering is a negative behavior, bad behavior, right? So in order to promote the good behavior, so good behavior in this case is answering in the classroom the question that I'm asking. That is a good behavior. Not answering is the bad behavior. To avoid the bad behavior, I'm giving 1,000 rupees, right? So then people try to uh, get the 1,000 rupees for each and every question that I'm asking. If I ask 10 questions, the 10,000 can be a particular individual. Then everyone try to answer and get that 10,000 quickly and motivate quickly and easily. They present their answers. Try to present their answers. So this is the idea, reinforcement theory. And these are the negative reinforcement. We have positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. හරි positive reinforcement එකක් අපිට දෙන්න පුළුවන් word of mouth එකකින් අපි කියනවා someone is asked a particular question, the one who answered may be appreciated by words. එයා හරි හොඳයි, we can appreciate by our own words rather than giving monetary rewards. අපි appreciate කරනවා නේ. දැන් answer එක දීපු කෙනාට බැලුවොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? If someone who answered the correct answer is blamed, then he will never answer this. Right? But if when he is appreciated, obviously we know that he will answer to the next question as well. Right? Always using positive outcomes, positive rewards, in other words, to repeat the correct behavior. In order to not to repeat the bad behavior, we introduce negative outcomes, which is known as negative, simply known as punishments. So that is given by the main idea is given by the reinforcement theory. Then facilitation theory. So facilitation theory is about this is called in other words as humanistic approach. So what it says basically, in order to take place a good learning, effective learning, there must be facilities to learn. For example, learning materials must be given, reading materials must be given, conducive environment must be provided, and a very good learning teacher or the teacher must be provided. All these are treated as facilities. Without giving facilities to learn, there is no longer having effective learning. We don't have, in order to get effective learning, so facilities must be given, right? So learning will occur by the educator acting as a facilitator. For example, now I'm facilitating you to learn these things. If I ask, by giving a note or by giving only a title, today's lesson is learning. So try to find out the content from the net, and I will give you some questions after that. So that's the only thing that I can do if I'm doing, right? So that's if I'm doing the same that thing only, so then you will no longer, you will not learn, because you don't know the content and what type of learning and how it is, fine. And maybe sometimes the things that I'm already I have given is vague, right? So content is vague. You don't have clear idea about which learning that you are supposed to learn and which topic and what is the content of learning. You don't know. So then you are maybe demotivated to learn. But if I take, let's say, this is the book chapter, this is the handout, and these are the titles to be referred, and I have prepared some additional videos, and I explain each of them in detail one by one. And at the same time, I am giving you the preparation questions, exam preparation questions as well. So then you clearly learn, and you easily learn, and you effectively learn the content, because content is given, materials are given, and the educator or the teacher act as a very good facilitator to learn, right? So physical, mental, everything facilities are given, right? So that is another theory, facilitation theory by Carl Rogers. And also not only by giving materials and human facilitation, but also the environmental facilitation. So you must provide a conducive environment for learning. Again, conducive means encouraging environment for learning, because learning is a kind of a meditation, a mental process, right? So you need to have you must have a calm, quiet environment to think about the things that you are learning, because since this is a mental process, mental psychological detractions may not be happen in the environment that you are learning. So therefore we simply say that you must be given a conducive environment, facilitative environment to to take place the learning process effectively. So therefore conducive, calm and quiet. Let's say, for example, you are provided a too cold environment. Let's say you are put into a room that sent into a room that has minus 25 Celsius degrees of Celsius. So then can you learn in that environment? No. So you are sent into a particular room. In that you have, let's say, 55 degrees of Celsius. So you are sweating and the environment is too hot, and will you be able to learn in that? So no, you are not. No, you are not no longer be able to survive in that environment. You are thinking about the sweating and eating, not just focusing on the things that you are learning. Or maybe you are focused into a high noisy area in the room that you have been allocated. Obviously, there is a huge noise, background noise, right? So therefore, conducive environment is a very good factor to effectively learn, right? So all these coming under the facility. So facilitator and facilitation role must be played by the lecturer or the teacher, right? So materials facilitated, environment facilitated, and the human facilitated for a learning activity.